What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 100, so we finally made the 100 mark. Really happy to have you listening, and really happy to announce our guest host, our co-host for this episode. And we've had him on the podcast a couple of times before, coincidentally for our 1-year anniversary super show, which we did back in November, and at the beginning of this month, or beginning of January, I should say, night one of Wrestle Kingdom. So I want to reintroduce to the podcast Mr. Kurt Johansson from Ringside Pod, from Kurt's Angles podcast. Kurt, good evening. How are you? And thank you for joining us on this momentous episode, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having us again, John. Like I said, I'm always happy to come on the show, and yeah, it just so happens, like the first time I came on, it was your anniversary show, and then it was one of the first ones of the new year, talking about Wrestle Kingdom Night 1, and now we're here for the big 100, so congrats on that first and foremost.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully, it's not an underwhelming guest for some of your listeners. I saw one person say, "Who's the big interview?" and I was just like, "Oh crap, it's just me." But
no, how can it be underwhelming? You're like as you described on Twitter, you're like the Brock Lesnar of the Wrestling with Johners podcast. You only come on when it's a big occasion, when it's the big show, and when the money's right, Kurt. Now I'll have to speak to you about the money after the episode, but let's just pretend for now that you're getting the big bucks at the end of this for appearing the Brock Lesnar of the Wrestling with Johners podcast. Only appear when the money and when the occasion is right. But thank you very much. Like I say, you have joined us a few times before, and this is going to be a really fun episode, and been thinking quite a lot about what to include in this episode, what fun things to do, and we're going to do one or two usual things. We're going to be covering this week's NXT, which was another awesome episode of NXT. Can't wait to touch on some of the highlights there with Kurt. We're going to be looking at we're a couple of months out from WrestleMania as well, and we're hot off the heels of a very good Royal Rumble show, I thought, and I thought it'd be interesting to do a couple of months out from WrestleMania to kind of have a look to see how the card is shaping up at the moment, how certain players are kind of lined up, what sort of feuds are kind of lined up for them heading into WrestleMania, and see kind of potential matchups, how the card might shape up come April the 5th, of course, from Tampa. And, maybe kind of suggest a few opponents for some wrestlers, WWF wrestlers, WWE wrestlers that haven't got obvious feuds or opponents going into the show of shows in April. So we'll have a little look at that. And then we've got some questions from some of our listeners and Twitter friends and Facebook friends to help celebrate our 100th episode. So that'd be fun to answer some of them a little bit later on. So, Kurt, back to yourself, first of all. It's always a pleasure to have you on the podcast, as always. I'm interested to know what sort of wrestling have you kind of caught up with lately? I know that you've been to a couple of NXT UK TV tapings. They're always fun, of course. But what's exciting you at the moment about the world of pro wrestling? Are there any kind of promotions or any wrestlers that are doing it for you? And what have you seen lately that's really got you excited as a pro wrestling fan then, Kurt?
In terms of being there live, I think it's a lot more reduced to what I'm used to. Like, I get married in August, so I've had to cut back on traveling around the UK or going to like America or anything like that. But yeah, I was at the NXT tapings in Hull before the new year, and then NXT UK tapings in York, which has some fantastic matches. But the things I'm excited about, away from the typical like NXT, AEW, Edge's return, and more that may tell what my personality is like, is All Japan Pro Wrestling. I've not really looked too much into it before until I saw, like, I knew who Shuji Ishikawa was and Joe Doering, they're legends of the sport. But when they got to come over to the UK for WrestleGate Pro and I saw them face each other, I was like, man, this is brilliant. And then obviously both of them faced Rampage Brown that night also. And Lucas Steele, who's from Hull, I know he debuted in All Japan. I think his faction's now called Corpse of God, and he's teaming with Shigehiro Iri, who's also coming across to the UK. And he's actually flying back out in February to face Ishikawa. He's facing, like, I think it's the something Giants. Like, I'm new to the product today, but from when I watched their shows for the new year, which was around Wrestle Kingdom time, really excited for what they was doing. Impact's doing good stuff. I like that they're doing this throwback TNA show for America, like for the WrestleMania. Sorry.
Yeah, so they're doing a TNA revisited kind of throwback sort of episode, aren't they?
Yeah, and like the first announcement was Aces of Eights. They've got D'Lo Brown and Ken Anderson as part of that. Then I quoted that tweet and said, all I want from this is the Wildcat Chris Harris to be on the show, and then for me, I'm sold. He retweeted and was like, thank you. And then it was announced that the Wildcat Chris Harris will make his return to TNA, which is amazing. Amazing Red's going to be there as well.
Awesome.
So it's going to be really good. And then, of course, with Ring of Honor, Marty Scurll, what a difference he's made so far since signing that new contract, becoming head booker. He's bringing in some new talent. Like we've got Session Moth Martina. She's going to be on the show. We've seen people re-signing their contracts. And now New Japan. New Japan are allowing talent to go back out there. Marty's gone to New Japan. He's doing stuff with NWA, which I love. Like, I think Marty could be one of the hubs of bringing all these different companies together.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating how, Marty Scurll, he was on the fringes. A lot of people weren't sure where he was going. He kind of appeared by surprise on NWA's pay-per-view, was Into the Fire in January, I believe. And since then, he's been made head booker of Ring of Honor, as well as getting quite a lucrative contract as a performer there as well. And popping up in New Japan. He's kind of, he's really making a big name for himself, doing what he's doing. I've been really impressed with Marty Scurll. I know you have as well. But kind of what he's doing on the kind of American and international stage with these different promotions, that's quite unheard of, isn't it, really? Certainly, he's kind of a bit of a free agent, but then he's kind of tying it all into one package, as in himself, the brand of Marty Scurll. I mean, how can you define what he's doing at the moment then, Kurt?
Drew McIntyre as Drew Galloway, he did something similar, I feel, when he first left WWE. But, it's unheard of. And I think the last time it was, especially in this modern era, it's not been heard of since WWE bought up all these territories.
Yeah.
And it's as if he's using his brand to get a sweet-ass deal with Ring of Honor, but then also appearing in NWA and making them two work together. Appearing in New Japan, and now those two will be working together. And how many more companies are going to work? Like, it would be good to see these territory style, whether that includes AEW or not. I think it'd be a fantastic way to incorporate all these fantastic companies to band together. A bit like what you see in Japan at the moment. Obviously, Bushi Road, owners of New Japan, they're now the owners of Stardom. And now the company that owns DDT have just purchased Noah and are going to be still promoting Noah and DDT separately, but obviously there's going to be a relationship there. So I think it's happening in Japan where they've banded together. Is that because WWE are trying to do an NXT Japan? They tried buying Stardom and Noah, but because they was just wanting to absorb those companies, their bids weren't accepted essentially. Yeah. And I think what Marty's doing, he could be maybe not the centerpiece of it, but I think he could be the biggest influence to ignite all these. Like, if AEW really want to use Marty Scurll, then they'll work with Ring of Honor. Just like what they're doing.
Yeah, and he's really kind of turned himself into a major player, not just with one brand, but multiple brands. And I suppose he's increasing his value if ever he does decide to go on to an AEW or possibly a WWE sometime in the future. But with what he's doing and how he's been able to raise his profile with these, with the variety of promotions that he's doing it with, he's proving once again that you don't need to be part of these big organizations to make good money and to make a superstar out of yourself. Like I say, he's creating this brand that he's taking from promotion to promotion to promotion. So all credit to him, really. I think what he's doing is absolutely amazing, to be honest with you. Kurt, give us a little bit of an update as far as what you're up to podcasting wise. I know you've got Kurt's Angle and you're part of the Ringsider crew and various other things that you dabble in on the creative side. But give us a bit of an update and give my listeners a bit of an update as far as what you've been up to lately or what the plans are going forward for your various creative content.
So I've been quite quiet recently, and I sent that message out, and then since then I've started reaching out to fellow podcasters and like, right, pulling my finger out now, let's start doing these collaborations. Not going to lie, I wouldn't say fatigued, but I wasn't happy. I'm my biggest critic, and I want to make something that's different, it's unique, a bit similar to my One More Match thing that I've been trying to do, where I'll speak to different content creators. The first episode had NXT UK's Travis Banks on it, where we just do one more match. You've got to essentially say who this person's going to face, where it's going to be, and it's just a little bit of fun. So I've been working on quite a few different things like that, both for Kurt's Angle and for Ringsiders, to hopefully start delivering more video content with Ringsiders. We're changing our game completely in that aspect. We are going to bring back our Don't Even Get Me Started, where you did one episode of that on YouTube, which a lot of people really enjoyed because you get to see how animated we are, ranting about certain topics. And basically, if you don't know the process of Don't Even Get Me Started, it'll be, you might use a random generator or pick a name out of the hat, and it'll give a topic. And you either have to rant what you don't like about it, or if you like it, you've got to rant why it's great. And it got heated. Jamie and Callum, they had some words to say regarding Orange Cassidy, so we're hoping to bring back that magic with Don't Even Get Me Started. And
yeah, and I've got to say, just off the back of that, I watched that episode and I absolutely loved it, and I think I commented to you guys at the time, it was a fantastic episode. So more of the same, please. Yeah,
so it's just that, and I'm quite a creative person, and it's just, I get so many ideas, it's just trying to put them in place. So I've just been working on finding out some different content like structure. So it could be things of like faction. I'm working on something called Faction Wars. I'm working on different scenarios regarding the factions as well for different offshoots. And even if we was doing like fantasy draft, it's a transfer window here in England for the like football or soccer for the American listeners. So something similar like that, where we do trade deals, have to say why we do that. If somebody picks somebody, then my mates, like the boys, can't pick them. And so we're just working on different stuff, which should be getting released in this month. And again, I've got some exciting interviewees potentially lined up. They're on board. We're just going through their press office essentially with companies such as AEW and New Japan. So hopefully that gets finalized soon, and we can bring those, what will be amazing interviews, to the listeners shortly.
Speaking of interviews, and we mentioned this the last time you were on during the Wrestle Kingdom Night 1 review, but your first episode of Kurt's Angle was with Thunder Rosa. Now, more recently, Thunder Rosa's had a bit of success on NWA. I think she won the NWA Women's Championship at their Hard Times pay-per-view. So you must have been really, really chuffed to have seen how she's kind of progressed and her success recently on NWA, especially after having interviewed her a couple of months ago, Kurt.
Yeah, 100%. I reached out to her and was like, congrats again. Like, we spoke about going for that title and going for Sienna, which what we thought may have been at the Into the Fire pay-per-view, but didn't happen there. Happened at Hard Times. It's come eventually, and all credit to her. She's the first Mexican-born woman to win the NWA World Women's Championship, which is absolutely incredible. She's one of my favorite professional wrestlers at the moment, regardless of gender. And I'm not just saying that because I interviewed her. Like when she accepted to come on my show, I was like, holy shit, this is great, because I was such a huge fan, and it was great to hear about her story, and hopefully I can get her thoughts again soon regarding winning the title. And we should have a former NWA World Tag Team Champion coming on Kurt's Angle in the next month. So by the end of February, hopefully we've got these dates aligned, and that should be an interesting interview.
Superb. Can't wait to hear them. And I'm sure as soon as we get wind of them on the Wrestling with John's podcast, we'll let our listeners and social media followers know. But Kurt, let's have a little look at this week's NXT before we speak about potential WrestleMania matches and our listener questions. So this week's NXT was another knockout show, to be honest with you. It's really, really good. The show opens with a reminder of Finn Balor attacking Trent Seven in the parking lot a few days earlier, looking to send a message to Tyler Bate, who came to Johnny Gargano's aid after Worlds Collide on Saturday night. And Worlds Collide was a fantastic show. In the opening contest on this week's NXT, we saw Finn Balor take on Trent Seven. This was a really cracking contest between these two, and with Balor dominating throughout pretty much. And after a coup de grace and a 1916 DDT, Balor defeated Trent Seven fairly convincingly, to be honest with you, while sending a clear message to Johnny Gargano ahead of their match in a couple of weeks' time at Takeover Portland. Now, Kurt, Takeover Portland is sure to be another amazing takeover. There's never been a bad NXT takeover, of course, but this match between Johnny Gargano and Finn Balor could be an all-time classic. We've spoken about great NXT matches over the years, and Johnny Gargano's been a part of many of those. Now, putting him across the ring from Finn Balor, possibly the number one and the number two best wrestlers on NXT right now, you have to say. You must be salivating for this one. This is definitely a dream match, and a match that we're all going to witness in just 2 weeks' time.
Oh, 100%. And it's the perfect scenario as well. You've got Mr. NXT and Johnny Gargano against somebody that used to be Mr. NXT and Finn Balor.
Yeah.
Now with his heelish persona, shall we say, like the Prince is truly back. And yeah, you said the two of the best wrestlers in NXT. The two of the best athletes in the world, regardless of company. You put them in a company, they're one of your main guys, no matter where they go. And this is one of the reasons, and one of many as well, should I say, that this upcoming takeover will be one of the greatest takeovers of all time, in my opinion, for what they've got lined up.
Definitely. We're going to talk more about some of the announced matches for Takeover Portland throughout this episode as we cover this week's NXT in particular anyway. But definitely one to look forward to there. And then we had an in-ring promo from Keith Lee calling himself a moment maker, a game changer, and now a prophecy ender after he beat Roderick Strong for the North American Championship on last week's NXT. Then we saw Damian Priest. He came out to address the Limitless One. Priest said that he usually gets what he wants, and what he wants right now is a North American Championship. Both men are then joined by Dominik Dijakovic, and Dijakovic calls Priest a bootleg Marilyn Manson, which I thought was quite funny. I think that the crowd got a bit of a pop from that one, and this leads to a bit of an impromptu match between Damian Priest and Dominik Dijakovic. So there were some really big moves between these two, plenty of false finishes, and that avalanche poison Rana from Priest onto Dijakovic was pretty epic. But it was Dijakovic who put Priest away with a Feast Your Eyes. I think he kind of called him with the ring post before hitting the Feast Your Eyes move, possibly setting up another massive encounter between Dijakovic and Keith Lee for the North American Championship, maybe. And although it's not been announced, it could also be a potential match for Takeover Portland. I know they've got one or two spaces left on that match card. As always, a really fun match between two big athletes, as in Dijakovic and Damian Priest in this one. I'd love to know your thoughts on what went down during this match, and potentially another Keith Lee Dijakovic match. They've had some outstanding matches in the past, but this time there could be some silverware or a championship bout on the line the next time they face. But give us your thoughts, Kurt.
Yeah, it was Keith Lee's. He's the man. Like, he's had an incredible couple of weeks. But it's magic. You know what he and Dijakovic can deliver. They had arguably one of the best series in NXT of 2019, in my opinion, with their matches. And I think their matches together really solidified them as players in NXT. I think before those set of matches, there was just floating around the place. And now look at them. They're over as hell. I think it's a great way to build Damian Priest up as well. Maybe before we get to TakeOver, get another Dijakovic Priest match, maybe a little bit longer with the number one contendership on the line.
Yeah.
I'd be all for another singles match, or could it be a triple threat, like 3 absolute titans going at each other? I'm excited, and I think it was only the beginning with Dijakovic and Priest.
I hope so. But yeah, a really good match. It wasn't the longest of matches, but that could possibly just be a taster for something that's just around the corner between those two. And yeah, I'd like to see, it could be Dijakovic versus Keith Lee for the North American Championship. It could turn into a 3-way between Priest, Dijakovic, and Keith Lee. That would be another good match that I think would really get a live crowd up on their feet. But then we see a bit of a backstage scene. There's 3 of the members of Undisputed Era laid out on the floor. We see Roderick Strong, Kyle O'Reilly, and Bobby Fish, of course, laid out, supposedly unconscious. Then Tommaso Ciampa comes into the scene with a metal pipe in hand. Adam Cole then comes out to confront Ciampa, who's in the ring. He comes out to attack, comes out to confront Ciampa about the attacks. This leads to Cole attacking Ciampa on the ring apron with a microphone, seemingly opening up. Tommaso Ciampa gets a bit of a cut on his forehead there. Ciampa recovers to powerbomb Adam Cole through a table that was set up in the centre of the ring before signing the contract for the championship match at TakeOver Portland in his own blood. So there we have it. We have the attack backstage. William Regal out on kind of the rampway announcing that it's going to be a contract between these two, but then they end up in a brawl and a powerbomb through the table, signed in blood, and the match for TakeOver Portland is signed in Tommaso Ciampa's own blood. So that's going to be our NXT World Championship match then, Kurt. Tommaso Ciampa versus Adam Cole. So another, alongside, we've already spoken about Finn Balor, Johnny Gargano at TakeOver Portland. This is another match that if you were going to get another match to top Gargano versus Balor, this has to be it, surely.
Oh yeah, 100%, and it's long-term storybooking, which what NXT do. We've been waiting for this match for so long, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Like, is the prophecy coming to the end? Like, we've seen Roderick Strong lose the championship. O'Reilly and Fish will defend their tag titles against the winners of the Dusty Classic, and then Adam Cole and Ciampa. Like, could this be the end for Undisputed Era as we know it, or Undisputed Era in NXT? And one thing I'd like to say about this NXT show as well, like the whole Ciampa attacking Undisputed Era backstage and Adam Cole actually not giving any fucks. Like, he's a heel, but he's not a cowardly heel. He doesn't shy away from a fight. He takes it to Ciampa, which was really good. And even earlier on with the Dijakovic and Priest match, when they start brawling, that wasn't supposed to be a match. And you always get this where people start brawling and they just pull apart and the fans are like, let them fight. NXT, let them fight. And you never see that on any show where the brawling and the referee comes out and just rings a bell. Normally, they take the heat out of it because they'll go for a break. Like, during the break, it's been made that it's going to be a match. Now, this one, they kept at it. And for those 2 segments alone, I thought, well done, NXT.
Yeah, really well booked and exciting TV as well. I was definitely kind of eyes glued to the TV and popping while sat on my sofa. I really, really enjoyed that segment, and yeah, really, really good. And yeah, then we got a bit of a grudge match between Tegan Nox and Dakota Kai. So this has been kind of brewing now since TakeOver War Games, when Dakota Kai turned on her best friend, slammed her leg in the cage outside the ring, of course. But this was a good match, and Tegan Nox got the win after interference from Candice LeRae on the outside, allowing Nox to drop Dakota Kai with a shot to the face with her knee brace before ending the match with her shiniest of wizards. So it was enjoyable for what we got, so I thought it was okay. But I've got to say, if this was their big feud blow-off match to settle their feud that's been brewing for a few months now, I've got to say I'm a little bit disappointed that they didn't have a bit more time or longer to kind of have this big grudge match. But what's your thoughts on this one? I mean, maybe it's the start of maybe a series of matches they're going to have. Maybe this is a bit of a taster. Maybe they're going to have a bigger, maybe a stipulation match, TakeOver Portland potentially. But if this was their kind of big feud blow-off match, Kurt, I was a little bit disappointed, I've got to say.
Yeah, I'd agree if that was the case. I don't think it was the payoff. I think it was just the first collision between the two of them. And there's so many different variables of where they both showed they wanted to use weapons. You had Candice LeRae come out. You also had Tegan Nox using the brace that Dakota Kai tried hitting her with. Tegan Nox hits her with it, hits her with the Chinese Wizard, and picks up the win. I think it'll lead to something else, whether that's going to be a last woman standing or I think it'd be quite poetic if it was a cage match, just because it all happened inside a small cage when it was supposed to be War Games. And I think it'll be... It's only starting with these two. And I think with everything else that was on the show, there wasn't room to put it on for too big. And NXT are clever. Like, we said it in the Dijakovic and Priest, it was a short match. We think it was teasing. And I think that's what they're going to do, is we're going to get Tegan Nox, Dakota Kai. We're going to get them for a couple more months, I imagine. And I wouldn't surprise if the payoff is round maybe Mania season.
Very true. I think this storyline, this feud's definitely got the legs, and I think it could definitely go a bit longer. And the way they've built up this feud and this rivalry between these two can definitely take us through to WrestleMania weekend, as long as they continue with the storyline and, like I say, make the next match or the next couple of matches feel bigger and more important. And like I say, a cage match would just be a fantastic finale to their feud. But fingers crossed. I think, similar to what we said earlier between Damian Priest and Dijakovic, I don't think this is the last we've seen between these two wrestlers either. And I think, quite exciting things down the line. And then that brought us to our main event. It's the final of the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic for 2020. It's the Bros awaits Matt Riddle and Pete Dunne versus the grizzled young veteran Zach Gibson and James Drake, of course. So this was an excellent tag team match. Both teams went through the ringer on this one. There were several close near falls and many superb high spots from both teams. Towards the end of this one, Pete Dunne got temporarily taken out with a doomsday device on the outside from GYV. That was a really excellent spot. I've seen them do that a few times before. Always impressive. However, Dunne somehow recovered to combine with Matt Riddle back in the ring with an assisted go-to-sleep and a win for the Bros awaits, not only to win the Dusty Classic for 2020, but to go on to face Undisputed Era in Portland, take over Portland in just 2 weeks' time as the new number one contenders for the tag team title. So this was a really good match to kind of cap off this week's NXT. Both teams were great. I truly believe that GYV, the Grizzled Young Veterans, are one of the best tag teams in the world today. They combine really well together, and some of their tag team offense and chemistry together is so smooth, but looks devastating at the same time. But as per previous years, a makeshift team went over in this tournament. So, previous years where there's been a makeshift team put together and going the whole distance, we had the very first Dusty Classic in 2015. You had Samoa Joe and Finn Balor. Last year, 2019, Aleister Black and Ricochet won the whole thing. And then again this year, Pete Dunne and Matt Riddle. So give us your thoughts on this. I mean, it was a good match, but does it, concern you a little bit about the depth of the NXT tag team roster, that they've done this tournament now for the last 4 or 5 years? And the majority of the time they've had like a bit of a makeshift team, 2 individuals, 2 singles wrestlers thrown together to not only be in the tournament, to go the whole way as well, Kurt. The tournament was very good. I really enjoyed it, especially the reformation of the Time Splitters, Kushida and Alex Shelley. That was a really good moment, and a shame they didn't progress any further than the first round. But is the tag division in NXT fairly weak at the moment, and that's why they're having to put these individuals together to make a tag team?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, NXT's tag division isn't strong at all. In my opinion, the best booked tag team division in WWE is NXT UK.
Yeah.
They put these two together. I'm all for it, to be honest. I think if it's going to be longer than what Balor and Joe was, or what Ricochet and Black was, then I'm all for that. Like, it kind of makes sense. Like, last time Dunne had a makeshift team, he didn't win because of Roderick Strong. And I think it'd be the perfect way to build this new tag team in Broserweights. And because of what's happening in the main event scene, you've got Johnny Gargano, you've got Finn Balor, you've got Ciampa, you've got Adam Cole. Is there room for Matt Riddle or Pete Dunne at the moment? It doesn't seem that way, because from this week's booking, it's as if the big bruisers are going for the North American Championship. So I think it's a good way to do something meaningful with them, potentially do something against each other down the line. It's interesting to see where they go, but I am expecting them to win at Portland.
Yeah, and I'm liking the combo of Matt Riddle and Pete Dunne. I like the interaction they have backstage with Matt Riddle being the kind of the chilled, kind of happy-go-lucky, kind of, you know, original bro, and then you got Pete Dunne, who's the stern-faced, serious. But I do like the chemistry they've got between the two of them. It does make me chuckle. But looking at Portland a bit closer, then we obviously mentioned Finn Balor versus Johnny Gargano. That's going to be a classic match. Then the championship match that was announced and signed in blood by Tommaso Ciampa. Tommaso Ciampa taking on Adam Cole for Adam Cole's NXT World Championship. We already know that Bianca Belair is going to be challenging Rhea Ripley for the NXT Women's Championship, or the NXT Championship as they're describing it now. The Bros awaits, the new Dusty Rose Tag Team Classic for 2020, as we mentioned, going up against Undisputed Era for the NXT Tag Team Championships. But possibly room for one or two other matches. I mean, I mentioned earlier, you know, we might see Keith Lee defend his North American Championship, possibly against Priest, possibly against Dijakovic. But a pretty, I mean, you mentioned it at the top of the show, Kurt, not just a pretty stacked card, but a really stacked card. And takeovers very rarely disappoint, if ever. But this card on paper at the moment is looking outstanding.
Yeah, 100%. It's looking incredible at the moment, and I think even Jordan Devlin is a new NXT Cruiserweight champion. He's going to be on NXT next week, but could he have that match? Like, he could easily steal the show. Could we get Tyler versus Devlin too? We just seen at the recent NXT UK takeover.
Yeah.
Or could we get Devlin against Garza in a one-on-one match where I'm sure
that would be outstanding.
Yeah, exactly. Those two would kill it. And I'm excited to see what Devlin does. I think it's a great way to showcase more of what NXT UK do. I think they've done a great presentation of grizzled young veterans during this tournament. Now we've got Devlin, who's the other marquee player in NXT UK, getting a chance to show the American audience what he's capable of, and that is not just a shit Finn Balor. He can arguably go toe-to-toe with Finn Balor, in my opinion. I think he's absolutely incredible. And it'll be interesting to see what matches get added to that card, because that card is absolutely brilliant.
And one thing that I've noticed recently, especially with, you know, off the back of TakeOver Blackpool 2 and now Worlds Collide, is you're seeing a lot more, with the Dusty Classic as well, you're seeing a lot more NXT UK talent on the Black and Gold brand, on NXT. And there seems to be a lot more kind of collaboration between the two brands, which is quite good. And I'm hoping that the Worlds Collide show will be a yearly thing, if not maybe twice yearly, because I thought it was a really good show and a good kind of showcase for both brands, in particular the NXT UK brand, which I think out of all of the kind of brands is kind of seen as the, you know, the the ugly stepchild, you know, but I think people have realised that there's so much talent on there, and as much, if not more, talent than, you know, the American counterpart. Especially when you look at their champion, Walter and Imperium, GYV, you know, Mark Andrews and Flash Morgan Webster, Jordan Devlin, and so many more. Gallus, of course, that it really is to be taken seriously. But I think, as you mentioned, I think we're going to see a lot more NXT UK talent on the Black and Gold brand, and there could be maybe some more cross-promotional stuff in the future. But would you like to see more of that, Kurt?
Yeah, I think with the BT Sports deal with NXT UK going on TV, I think it's a great way to, for those that don't have the network that would watch NXT on BT Sport, to see some of these stars and be like, oh, I want to see those more often. And I think we're going to get Tyler Bate, Finn Balor down the road as well, which will be absolutely incredible. And it's great to see NXT UK is going strength to strength, and yeah, more of this. Worlds Collide was fantastic, and hopefully they'll keep pushing all these different angles of cross promotion, and yeah, it's only going to be a positive.
Definitely. Well, I think we'll both agree that this week's NXT was absolutely fantastic. But moving on, and we spoke about TakeOver Portland, but the TakeOver after that is going to be TakeOver Tampa. And of course, that's going to be over WrestleMania weekend, the day before, the night before WrestleMania 36. And what I want to do now for the next 10 or 15 minutes is to have a look at hot off the heels of the Royal Rumble. I know we've got Elimination Chamber happening, I think about the 8th or the 9th of March, around that weekend. And then, of course, the next pay-per-view is WrestleMania. Now, of course, we've got the Saudi Arabia show sometime in February, but I don't think there's going to be any major angles or upsets that's going to happen there. But kind of looking at what we know now, Kurt, looking at some of the matches that, that could potentially happen on April the 5th in Tampa at WrestleMania 36. I mean, I think we know Drew McIntyre and Brock Lesnar, that's been formally announced. That was announced on Monday Night Raw following Drew's win at the Rumble. I think he announced that he wanted Brock. I think that's perfectly obvious from his actions on Sunday night anyway. I mean, as a UK wrestling fan and kind of a big supporter of UK wrestlers, you must be kind of chuffed to bits with what we saw on Sunday night. I think a lot of us hoped that Drew McIntyre would do well in the Rumble, but to actually see what he did, eliminating Brock Lesnar, then going all the way, having some fantastic, show-stealing moments, eliminating some of the favourites, and kind of ousting Roman Reigns as the very last person to be there at the very end. A great moment for Drew McIntyre and for all of his supporters over the last few years.
Yeah, it was incredible to see Drew get that moment. Like, talk about reinvention. He's an absolute unit. He's absolutely fantastic. And for him to get that, you could see how much it meant to him at the end of it. And whenever you hear him speak about the moment, you can hear the passion and the emotion in the tone of his voice. And the part with Brock Lesnar, I really enjoyed him eliminating. I thought there was a few wastes, but I think he made a style with Keith Lee. He put over Keith Lee really well. Like, Brock gets slated. Brock's one of the best workers. His facials are absolutely brilliant. His expressions sell everything. And with everything he did to then Drew eliminating him, that made Drew. When that happened, everybody wanted Drew to win the Rumble because people were like, yeah, Drew's great. He needs to be pushed better, but his booking's not really been there. But for that jubilation of stopping Lesnar, eliminating everybody in the manner that he was, it set Drew for the collision course of WrestleMania, and for me, he's winning the title.
Yeah, I think, well, unless WWE are going to kind of do what they did at WrestleMania 34 in New Orleans when everybody thought that it was Roman Reigns' year, or at least an opportunity to get the belt off of Brock, and it didn't happen that way. I hope they don't try to do the same this time around. I think it's an opportunity to make another big superstar, another big name for the future. And we've seen it over the years when Triple H has put over people like Batista, and there's been these big moments, big WrestleMania moments where a new star has been born at the end of it. And I truly hope that the last thing we see on April the 5th, WrestleMania 36, is Drew McIntyre holding the WWE Championship. And I think that would be another moment for them to play for years, decades in the future of when they created a new star. We all know what Drew is capable of doing, but let's say the booking has not always been favourable towards him. And hopefully, if they do the right thing, they're going to create another megastar on April the 5th. But what about the Universal Championship then? So it's quite intriguing. I mean, the last couple of pay-per-views, the Fiends had Daniel Bryan as an opponent. Now, I thought their match on Sunday at Royal Rumble was actually quite good. Probably the best of the singles matches on the undercard, in my opinion. I thought, the strap gimmick didn't really play out as well as they might have liked, but I thought the two individuals made it work because of who they are and how good they are. But who do you think is the likely opponent for the Fiend? I think a lot of people's obvious answer is Roman Reigns, but have you got any kind of curveballs there? Anybody you'd like to see face the Fiend at WrestleMania?
To be honest, I would like to see Roman, but if I was trying to throw a curveball in, I'm just trying to think of who's on the SmackDown roster these days that's in that position other than Miz or Bryan. I think the only other person you can go with is Roman Reigns, if not Braun Strowman.
Maybe. But where does Daniel Bryan fit into all of this then? Because he's been the championship contender for the last 2 pay-per-views, so for the last couple of months, and he's gone back to kind of the Yes movement, Daniel Bryan. Since he's kind of had his hair cut and his beard trimmed, he looks 10 years younger. He looks like the 2011 Daniel Bryan. Back when his kind of popularity started to catch light. But now that Daniel Bryan's been on the losing end, 2 consecutive pay-per-views to the Fiend, he can't surely be involved in the title picture again come WrestleMania, can he? So, I mean, is there an obvious feud for Daniel Bryan or an obvious match or opponent for Daniel Bryan come WrestleMania? Or is he just going to be slotted into a lower card match or maybe the Andre the Giant Battle Royal? I mean, when we look at Daniel Bryan's history with WrestleMania, I think he's been in 7 or 8 Manias, and the majority of those have been for a championship. He's been involved in championship matches in nearly all of his WrestleMania opponents' matches. But Daniel Bryan, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Where do you see him come April the 5th then, Kurt?
Either in the main event with Fiend and maybe Roman as a triple threat.
Yeah.
Or maybe something to do with the Intercontinental Championship. Bryan and Nakamura, or maybe some sort of ladder match.
Oh, now Bryan and Nakamura, that's a match I hadn't considered. But so that's a match I didn't know I wanted, but now I want it. That's good, Kurt. I like your thinking there, definitely. But yeah, interesting one, because he deserves to be in a featured match. He's still one of the most popular and most over wrestlers in the promotion. And like I say, now that he's gone back to his babyface gimmick, he can do it whether he's a heel or a babyface. He turns it on and he excels in either gimmick, to be honest with you. But I think, it will be a wasted opportunity if they don't kind of put him in a featured match for sure. But I like the idea of Shinsuke versus Daniel Bryan. That could be a match definitely for people to tune in. And sometimes they give us those sort of matches that you're not always expecting out of WrestleMania. But that could be one to look forward to potentially. But how about some of the women's championship matches then? So Charlotte obviously won the women's Royal Rumble on Sunday then, Kurt. But I don't think she's announced which championship she's going to go for. Now, you've obviously got either Becky Lynch on the Raw brand, you've got Bayley on the SmackDown brand. Now, Charlotte is, currently drafted to the SmackDown roster. There's some rumblings out there on the internet that she could potentially challenge for the NXT championship as well, the women's championship, that is. But give us your thoughts on Charlotte and, who would you like to see her face at Mania?
Rhea Ripley. I think Charlotte deserves to win the Royal Rumble. I think it was a great win for her. And I think to have something different other than the typical, like we could have Becky versus Shayna for Raw's Women's Championship. We could have maybe a Bayley and Sasha Banks match for the SmackDown, and then a Charlotte and Rhea Ripley for the NXT. And I think that'd be absolutely fantastic. You could have so many different matches. You could have the Shayna and Becky Lynch for the Raw. You can have Becky Lynch and Shayna for Raw. You could have Bayley and Sasha for SmackDown. And I would go for Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte for the NXT Women's Championship. I think that's the fresh match, which should be an absolute showcase. And I think it's something outside the box. And could that be something that happens at TakeOver? Rhea Ripley defends against Bianca Belair. All of a sudden, Charlotte comes out and she's like, right, I want you at WrestleMania.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I mean, I'd like to see Shayna involved. I think that she deserves, a WrestleMania match. Now, I mentioned this on our Royal Rumble predictions show that even though she main evented and won the Survivor Series match, that triple threat match that main evented Survivor Series last November, I felt that her name value wasn't up there with the casual WWE fans, and I felt they need to do more with her. I really enjoyed her her run in the Royal Rumble, and I really thought for a second there that she was going to kind of overcome and actually defeat Charlotte to kind of really propel her, herself into the more casual audience, you could say, as a real superstar to be taken seriously on the WWE roster. That didn't quite happen, but I think the run and the stint she did have in the Royal Rumble really, really helped her name value. And I think they need to do more of that to kind of get Shayna more recognised with the casual audience, so that if she was in a championship match at WrestleMania, then people will be able to get behind her or understand her character, or maybe just know a bit more about Shayna Baszler if they're more of a casual fan. Or if you're not a casual fan, you watch NXT, you know of Shayna's history on the black and gold brand in particular, then I'm sure you'll be rooting for her to have a championship match and win at Mania. So that could be interesting. I'd like to see Shayna versus Becky, definitely for the Raw Women's Championship. I like your idea of Charlotte versus the current NXT champion Rhea Ripley, of course. Bayley, on the other hand, any suggestions for Bayley? I mean, a lot of people are suggesting that maybe Sasha Banks could be her opponent, although they're cohorts at the moment. They work as friends on SmackDown. But any thoughts on Bayley's opponent? Now, I've got to say before you answer that, I have been quite underwhelmed by Bayley as a heel and as the SmackDown Women's Champion. But where do you see kind of that title picture heading into WrestleMania then, Kurt?
Honestly, I don't know. I'm really underwhelmed with the whole SmackDown Women's division at the moment. The best thing about it is Mandy Rose and what she's doing with Otis. I think it's got to be the Sasha Banks match. I think that's the only way we're going to get it.
That's the big one, isn't it?
Yeah, of anything other than that, I don't think anybody else has been booked well enough. You might get Naomi, maybe. Like, she returned in the Rumble, but anything... I just find it underwhelming at the moment on the SmackDown side of things.
Yeah, no, I got to agree. So they really need to turn up their efforts there to get us tuned in and excited for what they're doing ahead of WrestleMania. But a couple more things WrestleMania related then. So you expect to see Rhea Ripley defending her NXT Championship against Charlotte on the show of shows, April the 5th, WrestleMania. But is there room for possibly a men's NXT Championship match? Maybe Adam Cole being on the big show in Tampa on WrestleMania. Would you like to see Adam Cole there? I mean, the main roster, we've seen a lot more of NXT recently, not only in the Rumble this past Sunday, but with Survivor Series, of course. Is there room for an NXT Men's Championship match as well?
It'd be nice to see, especially if they don't do a takeover before WrestleMania. I don't know who I'd put him against, to be honest. Like we said, we've got Daniel Bryan there. Maybe Velveteen Dream, if he was to return. I don't know who they'd be. It depends who the champion is at the moment as well. If we've got Tommaso Ciampa, that'd be massive. You may get Ciampa and Balor at Mania. I think that'd be a big match. Everybody loves Finn Balor, and Ciampa will absolutely smash it. So I'd like to see it, but I don't know if it'd be a main roster competitor. I'd go for you'd either have Balor versus Ciampa, because I do think Ciampa would be champion by then, or maybe just go fucking balls to the wall. Let's steal the show. Gargano versus Ciampa versus Balor versus Cole.
Wow. That would be amazing. But we all know that WrestleMania is a long shows. I mean, they usually average about 4 to 5 hours. That's the main show, couple of hours pre-show. You're talking 6 or 7 hours of WrestleMania. And that's usually a lot of filler matches. So if they focus on some of the top tier talent, mainly concentrated on championship matches, they might be able to squeeze in the odd NXT match, maybe a women's championship match or a men's championship match. But that is yet to be seen. Like I say, we're only kind of fantasy booking at the moment based on the fact that they have been elevating NXT a lot more since they've been live on the USA Network, and seen it as more the third brand, more on a level with the Raws and the SmackDowns. So it would only make sense to have NXT as a more prominent, have a more prominent role, maybe have one or two prominent matches or featured matches on the main card for WrestleMania as well. But they will be having a takeover the night before Takeover Tampa. So after Portland, we'll probably have a reasonable idea of how Takeover Tampa's looking, or we might have a fair idea of whether NXT could be it could play a part on WrestleMania as well. But we're always certainly going to get Edge versus Randy Orton at WrestleMania. I think that was looking a dead cert, certainly from what happened on Monday. That would be a good match between two veterans, two very experienced pros that know each other very well. Great to see Edge. I mean, that was kind of the moment of the whole night, really. Edge's entrance and coming out on the spears and the crowd kind of marking out big time. I know I did from the comfort of my own living room, but Edge returning after having been retired for 9 years. It was WrestleMania in 2011 when he kind of wrestled his last match, retired the night after. But possibly an Edge Randy Orton match. Would that do anything for you?
That's the match that I'm looking forward to more than anything. I think it'll be incredible. Edge showed he still got it, and he knows he's still got it.
Yeah.
Randy Orton's such a safe worker, and they've got such good chemistry. I think it's the perfect match just to ease Edge back into things. It'll be incredible. It's a match that I'm really looking forward to, and I'm so happy for Edge. Obviously, the breaking of his neck 17 years ago, and then having to retire 9 years ago because it just wasn't good. Triple neck fusion, he's worked his ass off.
Yeah.
And now he's back, and what a moment. I think I've watched that returning video about... Every time I see it on my timeline, I'll watch it because it's just fills me with so much joy, the fact that he's managed to do it. Like, wrestling, it's not often that it'll pull emotions from me, but Edge retirement was one where I was upset, and him returning, I was just overwhelmed, and it's great to see.
Yeah, and like I say, much the same going back a few years as when Daniel Bryan announced that he was returning after being retired for 2.5 years. But a really great moment on Sunday night when Edge made his return at the Royal Rumble, and he was there till the final four as well. So he really came back with a bang. But one more name I'm going to throw out there. Now, he's been hot on everybody's lips. We've already spoken about him today as part of the NXT review. He had an amazing 2019. In particular, that kind of face-off, that showdown with Roman Reigns in that Survivor Series match, and then a really good kind of encounter with Brock Lesnar. But of course, I'm talking about Keith Lee. Now, he's got to be one of the most exciting talents on weekly NXT TV at the moment, Kurt.
Yeah.
And he's really making a big name for himself on the main roster as well with these cameo appearances, like I said, at the Survivor Series, and then again at the Royal Rumble. I think they know what they have when it comes to Keith Lee. And I think that the management and, definitely Triple H, but certainly Vince McMahon, I think he likes what he sees in Keith Lee. He's very charismatic. He's got a good look. He's a big guy, powerful, got some great moves for a big guy, as we all know. But could he potentially be a player at this year's WrestleMania? Where do you see him fitting in, if at all, in April?
If he's on the show, I see him winning the Andre the Giant Battle Royal.
I was thinking the same. Yeah, and that would be a good kind of moment for him, and could really elevate him a lot more. But I think he's definitely the next big man that they're going to kind of invest in and put all their stock in. But that's exactly where I see Keith Lee being come April the 5th. So we shall see, but it's quite interesting and quite intriguing, talking about WrestleMania a couple of months out, and where the pieces might fall and how the puzzle might come together, and where certain wrestlers, what feuds or storylines or matches they might be involved in, kind of when it gets closer to April. Of course, we're talking about it 2 months out. We'll obviously be talking a lot more about WrestleMania as we get closer to April. We get closer to WrestleMania weekend, and we might revisit this on a kind of a post-WrestleMania episode to see kind of whether any of our predictions or thoughts came true. But quite interesting. It's definitely going to be a fascinating show. But there's obviously going to be lots to watch around WrestleMania weekend, whether it be NXT or WWE-led product, and a lot of indie shows happening around the Tampa area. Lots to get excited about for WrestleMania weekend. But we've spoken about NXT. We've spoken a little bit about WrestleMania off the back of Royal Rumble, of course, Kurt. We've got some questions to answer from the Twitterverse, from our friends on Twitter and from our friends on Facebook and listeners and people that wanted to kind of help celebrate the Wrestling with John's 100th episode. So let's get stuck into one or two of them then. So our friends over at Aussie Lucian, I know you've done a podcast with them in the past, and I know I've got one lined up with Aussie Lucian in the next few weeks. But one of Aussie Lucian's questions that he sent via Twitter was, if you could create a gimmick match that's never been done before, Kurt, what would it be? So what sort of concept of a gimmick match would kind of, get you Dusty Rhodes thinking cap on here, because he was always good at coming up with kind of novelty matches like this. Of course, he invented the War Games match and the War Games concept. But any kind of gimmick matches that you think could work that we haven't seen before?
Oh, that's a difficult one.
What were you thinking? What one concept that I thought is it might be more suited to maybe the 24/7 Championship. But do you remember the Saturday afternoon game show Wipeout, where you would have these contestants on these obstacles and things would kind of fly around and you'd have to jump over them and there'd be water obstacles? They could possibly have defend the 24/7 Championship on a contraption like that. Maybe I don't know, but you'd have to think of something that would have to be outdoors for something like that. That could be quite interesting. But I could see potential injuries happening, but it could be quite fun. But any kind of novel concepts that could potentially become a wrestling gimmick match in the future.
I think it's difficult. Like, you could try and think of one where it's a bit like the 3 stages of hell, where every fall is going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
But you could potentially have it where, say you've got, I don't know, 10 people or something like that in a battle royal. The only way to be eliminated is pinfall. When you get down to the first 4 eliminations and there's only 6 people left, then you can change up the rules or something like that. Maybe the next one has to be submission. And then maybe when you got to the final 4, there's a ladder match. You can get an opportunity if you win the title or win a certain opportunity, something like that. Maybe something along those lines, where instead of 3 different scenarios for the same people, it's a different elimination process, where when so many people get eliminated, the next match starts. And then when they get eliminated, another match starts. And then there's that final match where it could be either 2 people, or it could be, say, the final 4 in a ladder match or something along those lines.
Yeah, one of the more novel gimmick matches that I've seen or heard of recently, I haven't actually clapped eyes on it yet, but I know Progress did at, I think it was chapter 100 or 101, they did a reverse battle royal where you had to get your opponents in the ring in order to eliminate them. That was quite interesting, but not my idea, not my brainchild, that one. But it's an interesting one with a bit more thinking time.
That was from TNA.
Oh, was it really? So, okay. So, I wasn't aware of that. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, it'd been a gimmick where it fell flat on its ass in TNA. So then a lot of the Progress fans saying, let's have a reverse battle royal, and then they finally did it.
Yeah. I mean, and then of course in NXT UK they had the British rounds thing, didn't they? Which is quite not necessarily a new concept, because of course it was a take on typical the world of sport, Saturday afternoon TV, where it'd be the best of 3 falls and a certain time limit per fall. But I don't think that worked tremendously on NXT UK, which is why they only did it the once or twice. But yes, I think that WWE are looking at how to mix things up and possibly give us novel gimmick matches, and I'm sure it's happening on the independent circuit. But yes, the best I could come up with is some sort of 24/7 wipeout concept. But you never know. So let's have a quick look then. We have some questions from Everything Pro Wrestling Podcast. So what is your favourite wrestling or non-wrestling video games. So I've got to be honest, I'm not a big player of video games, to be honest with you. It's been many years since I've had any sort of console or I did used to like playing the football games. I did used to like playing the football manager games or the wrestling games, but it has been a good while since I've had a console or played any video games. I know my family do, my kids do, but are you a video game fan? Do you play video games? And could you answer this question from Everything Pro Wrestling?
Yeah, so I'm quite the gamer. I enjoy it. If I was sticking to like consoles, I think for a wrestling game would be, I'd go back to maybe Here Comes the Pain. I think that was one of my favorite WWE games. And a non-wrestling video game would probably be either the Resident Evil franchises 2 or 3, or maybe Last of Us. But again, I play on computers as well, so Football Manager. And I think my favorite wrestling game of all time is Total Extreme Wrestling. I use that on the computer quite a lot to book my own shows and get my own grades. I was doing something with Brainbuster where I was asking everybody, here's a match, you've got to book it. And I was doing the G1 where everybody had random matches. So we never knew who was going to get to the final of the G1 because everybody was having their own agenda of who they'd choose to win a match. So I was doing that through Total Extreme Wrestling as well, where you can book WWE, sign talents and things like that.
Cool. And sorry, I wasn't able to provide much of an answer there as far as video games are concerned, but there we go. What is the next movie you want to see? So another question from Everything Pro Wrestling. What's the next movie you want to see, whether it be on the small screen or the big screen? For myself, I'm quite interested. I want to see the kind of DC Batman Joker spin-off, Birds of Prey, which focuses on Harley Quinn, starring Margot Robbie. So that looks quite fun, and that's actually received some quite good press as well. So I think maybe the next time me and the wife goes on a date night, that could be our movie of choice after the meal. But what about yourself, Kurt?
It's the same. My fiance messaged me saying, "Hey, come and go see this." So when that's out in cinema, we'll be going to see Birds of Prey.
Definitely. Yeah, that looks a lot of fun. And final question from Everything Pro Wrestling. Who is a future AEW champion on their roster as of today? So I think this is quite an interesting one. So AEW champion, I'm assuming he's referring to world champion. Of course, they've only got the one singles championship currently on AEW. So obviously you've got to imagine that Chris Jericho is going to lose his championship at some point in the future. For myself, I like the look of... I'm a big fan of Luchasaurus. Maybe not this year, but certainly, within the next year and a half, I can see Luchasaurus being elevated to absolute megastar status. He's got a fantastic look. He's got a great presence. He's got the size. I love his tattoos. I love his gimmick. And I think he's a decent worker in the ring as well. So I think, whether it's from a merchandising standpoint, I know the guy can talk as well. He's good on the microphone. He's good in interviews. But I think he could be a good champion for the promotion. Of course, you've got the obvious answers, possibly Jon Moxley, Kenny Omega. But from left field, I'm probably going to go for Luchasaurus. But how about you, future AEW champion, Kurt?
Going left field. Funny you should say Luchasaurus. I'm going with Jungle Boy.
Yeah.
And I think it's why it's important that JR is calling him Jungle Boy Jack Perry, because it gives more of a star persona to his name rather than just Jungle Boy. And within 3, if not 2 years, Jack Perry, AEW World Champion.
There we go. So that's 2 out of 3 of Jurassic Express as world champion. You don't fancy Marco Stunt as a future world champion then, Kurt?
Never say never, but
no. But some interesting answers there. And then we got a question from Foul Original. So big fans of Foul Original. We've had Foul on the podcast before. It's got a great podcast and YouTube channel in particular. But Foul asks, what are both of yours thoughts on the new wrestling TV contract on British TV. So I think he's referring to obviously WWE content going over to BT Sports from Sky Sports. And then you've got Channel 5, of course, over the last couple of weeks. They've come out to say that they're going to be showing a 1 hour highlights package of Raw and a 1 hour highlights package of SmackDown on a weekly basis as well. But have you got any thoughts on this in particular, Kurt, especially with regards to the BT Sports deal and now Channel 5 coming on board?
I think Channel 5's amazing. I think they realised there was a massive portion of WWE fans that don't have BT Sport, maybe not be able to afford BT Sport because of the current Sky package or whatever the reasons may be. I think BT Sport's fantastic home for them, especially if they want to do live events for NXT UK, because BT Sports, they do live football, they do live sports across the board. So who knows? NXT UK being on BT Sports is absolutely amazing. I think they get shown about 3 times a week, if not more. And what happens when they want to do live events, instead of having to bring their production team all the way from America every time, hey, guess who can do live sports? BT Sports. I think that'd be a route they'd go down, and I think it's an absolutely incredible deal in terms of growing their UK brand.
Yeah, and I think we brought the point up a couple of weeks ago on this podcast, and the question, very similar question, came up when I was with Rob from the Bob Culture podcast. And from my point of view, I think it's really good to have these highlights packages on Channel 5. And I know that NXT UK is going to be on the Paramount channel for 1 hour, although quite late at night. You can, of course, record it and watch it back at a more reasonable time. But I think it's really good to bring in the casual viewer, or maybe the lapsed fan, the fans that maybe couldn't afford Sky or BT Sports, but also more important for the families as well. And I think getting the families around the TV for to watch Raw for 1 hour on the Saturday or SmackDown on the Sunday for 1 hour, whenever they're going to be airing. I think when I was growing up as a youngster, these 1 hour highlight shows were kind of what brought me in, and maybe a big fan of the support. So I think that certainly for the younger audience and for the families, I think these 1 hour highlight shows on Channel 5 are going to be absolutely fantastic, and it could create, future wrestling fans. And you never know, potentially these youngsters wanted to be professional wrestlers in the future. But I think it's a massive bonus, a massive thumbs up from me, definitely. Let's have a look. So we've got Michael Jolly on Twitter. Now, he asks...
I like the bottom question.
What, from Michael?
Yeah, I like that one.
Yep. So we'll get to that one. I quite like his top one, though. So what match... got you both into wrestling? So was there a particular match that you can remember that really, pricked up your ears and your eyes kind of standing out on stalks, thinking, yeah, what's this wrestling lark all about? And your one match that you kind of really remember with fond memories, Kurt. What about yourself?
For my first match that would have got me into wrestling's a difficult one. I used to watch Raw and things like that, and I used to watch a lot of old tapes of WrestleManias as well. So I was always starstruck with Hulk Hogan. And growing up, I had videos of Hogan and Andre and Warrior and things like that. But the match that made me fall in love with wrestling, I'd have to go with. I'm trying to think of what would be my starting point. It has to be the Rock and Austin saga. Watching stuff in the Attitude Era as a kid, I just loved the Rock. I loved Austin, and they were the two that captivated myself. And they're the two where I can truly remember. Yeah, that's when I knew this is something that I'm going to stick with for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I think I've gone on record before to say that the Royal Rumble 92 was one of my first standout memories as a wrestling fan that really got me hooked. And I really loved the whole show and the main event Rumble match where Ric Flair went over in the end to win the WWF Championship. But I think I probably saw before that maybe a VHS tape of WrestleMania 6. Now, I only got into wrestling from about late 91, so this would have been a friend's house, possibly had a VHS recording from Sky Sports from the year before, and I think that main event between Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 6 was the match that really kind of maybe, fall in love with the sport and maybe think, what's this wrestling all about? I need to see more. I need more. So if not the Royal Rumble 92, definitely Hogan versus Warrior from WrestleMania 6. Let's have a look. So we'll go to the bottom question of Michael Jolly's set of questions. Are you like me, Michael asks, amazed at how Chris Jericho reinvents himself to stay relevant? I've gone on record before saying that this current incarnation of Chris Jericho, I think, is the best Chris Jericho we've ever had. Now, you've obviously had the Y2J Jericho. You've had, the list Jericho, Le Champion, the current incarnation. But I think life at the moment, I think he's not his best wrestler version of Chris Jericho, but I think the gimmick and the package is everything that I want from a Chris Jericho at the moment. But I'm not amazed at how Chris Jericho reinvents himself, because I think he showed the ability to reinvent himself kind of early on, really. And even when he was in WCW, he was trying things, and you could see that he was kind of trying to almost find himself and reinvent himself almost on a weekly basis on WCW TV. And then, of course, we've seen the various kind of incarnations of Jericho through his WWE career. He's probably got about a dozen gimmicks that he could fall back on if he wanted to. But I'm not surprised. I think he's a very, very intelligent wrestler. He is a wrestler's wrestler, really. And I think just like Madonna in the pop world, or you could say, what The Undertaker's done for his career, I think Jericho is definitely up there as an icon of pop culture and wrestling culture as well. And I think he deserves all the success. And I absolutely love what he's doing at the moment as the champion, the AEW World Champion. But do you want to kind of add your two penneth worth there to Michael's question?
I think you've covered most of it, to be honest. I think Jericho needs to go down as one of the greatest of all time. Yeah. I think he doesn't get the credit. Like what he's doing now with AEW, the Rock and Rage of wrestling stuff, I think it's fantastic. And for me, he's probably, like what you said, I love his character right now, and it's the key point of a Wednesday night for me and for many others. Like none of his segments have drawn less than what NXT has done, which is incredible, and I think that says a lot to Jericho.
Yeah. I've got a question here from one of our Facebook community group members, Kieran Reid, a regular contributor on the podcast as well. And Kieran asks, I think it's directly to me, but what's been my favourite episode to record of the Wrestling with Johners podcast? But he puts here not including interviews, obviously guessing that I'd go to one of my interviews that I've done. But I've really enjoyed recording the Double or Nothing episode that I did, the Double or Nothing review episode in May that I did with Chris Thornton and Ash Crawford. And that was the first time that I recorded with kind of in like a three-man booth, you could say, with two other guests. That was really a lot of fun off the back of a really great show. That was AEW's first proper pay-per-view Double or Nothing. I really enjoyed recording the Wrestle Kingdom shows as well with yourself, Kurt. We covered night one, and with Grizz, another kind of Facebook friend and regular contributor on the podcast, night two. Although I did butcher quite a few of the Japanese names, but you did kind of jump in and help me out on occasions where I was struggling with some of the Japanese names. But I don't think that's ever going to change, to be honest with you. One episode that does stand out, however, was quite a recent one, and I recorded just a couple of episodes, as a matter of fact, with Chris, Half Decent, the rapper, and Heather, where we covered their adventures on the Jericho Cruise, the Rock and Wrestling Rager at Sea Part 2, and that was a really fun episode. So I've probably given you kind of an expanded answer there, Kieran, but quite a few favourite episodes, but really enjoyed the recent one we did where we covered the Jericho Cruise and the Wrestle Kingdom episodes, of course, one of those being with Kurt, and the Double or Nothing episode. So there's a few there. To be honest with you, every new episode that I do then becomes my new favourite, to be honest with you. So I'm sure episode 100 will be my next new favourite. But yeah, just having a lot of fun doing the podcast. Rob from the Bob Culture podcast, he asks, first of all, he says, congrats, man, which is really nice of him. We had Rob on the podcast for episode 97, whatever the episode was when he was on. That was a really good episode. And he asks, who is my dream interview? I was thinking about this when I first got to Rob's question, and I've probably got a two-part question, to be honest with you. The first has to be, and unfortunately he's no longer with us, but if he was, I would love to have spoken to and had this person on the podcast, Vader, or Big Van Vader. His early run in Japan, in particular his battles with Stan Hansen, were kind of legendary. I've really enjoyed his breathtaking championship reigns as WCW World Champion back in the early 90s, his brutal matches with Cactus Jack. I'd like to hear kind of his honest thoughts and opinions on how he believed he was treated during his WWF run back in the mid-90s. If I was to kind of interview somebody living, honestly, I'd really like to interview Ric Flair. He's always been one of my favourite wrestlers. Going back to when he survived that plane crash back in 1975, his legendary runs as NWA World Champion throughout the 80s, as the real World Champion, where he would travel from territory to territory defending the NWA World Championship, his epic series of matches with Ricky Steamboat in 89, and then his initial run in the WWF from 91 through to 93, and having one of the best first years in the company ever. When he joined the company, WWF in 91 through to the end of 92, like I say, he came on the scene. He was feuding with Hogan. He won the Royal Rumble, won the WWF Championship, defended it at WrestleMania against Randy Savage. That kind of period alone really sets him aside as having one of the best first year runs of anybody that's coming to the WWF. But if I could sit down with Vader or Ric Flair, that would be a dream come true for me. I know we've obviously spoken about Kurt's angles and Ringsider, but any dream interviews that you'd like to kind of sit down with, and any bucket list interviews that you'd like to tick off, Kurt?
Obviously, The Rock for me.
Yeah.
Growing up, absolutely idolized him. I think if I was to think of the UK one that I'm hoping to get sorted soon, which is one that I've really wanted to do, is one with Roy Knight. And there's so much that he can put out there, and I'd say Sting. Yeah,
that would be awesome. Yeah, that would be pretty awesome. Really down to earth as well. I kind of met him at WrestleCon a couple of years ago, and just a really nice guy. Not sure if he's going to be at this year's For the Love of Wrestling, which is in Liverpool, and I'll be at that. You go into that event in April for the Love of Wrestling, Kurt, or any thoughts of going?
Probably not this year, just because I know how much money I'll spend, and
yes, of course, you're getting married in August.
Yeah, so unfortunately not. There's so much good wrestling where I'm like, right, I think I can justify doing one show. So I was looking at For Love of Wrestling. I was looking at Super Strong Style 16 and the upcoming Dream Tag Team Invitational with Fight Club. So I've just got to decide which one I'm going to try and sort out.
Cool. And I think it was around the time of Super Strong Style 16 last year, which is where I kind of first came across you and kind of reached out to you. And that's when we started chatting through Twitter. But so another question. First of all, we've got a question from Ditz. Ditz, obviously, from Ditz on Wrestling. And like I say, an excellent podcaster and a regular contribution on Twitter. But Ashley Clements also asks a very similar question. So I'll ask Dick's question, but it's very similar to what Ashley was asking as well. My favourite moment or proudest moment from the podcast from the previous 99 episodes of Wrestling with Johners. I've got to say, some of my favourite moments, recorded the Ask Johners Q&A specials. We did one, I think, on the 50th episode, and then we did one with Kurt for the first year anniversary in November. So they were good fun. So the Q&A, Ask Johners are always good fun. And obviously we're doing another kind of Q&A section here, which is good fun also. Doing the podcast recently with Matt Bayliss, a close long-time friend of mine and one of the earlier kind of contributors on the podcast. We did a Takeover Blackpool 2 review from our hotel room, hot off the heels of sitting in there in the Empress Ballroom, and that was a really fun show, just kind of talking for 45 minutes on what we'd just seen. Completely off the cuff reactions on what had just happened inside the Empress Ballroom, but that was really fun to record that with Matt. Some of my favourite moments, I've mentioned about the interviews, although Kieran didn't want me to mention about the interviews earlier, but I've really enjoyed doing the interviews, especially the ones I did with Jimmy Corderas, former WWF referee, and Gary Capetta, former WCW and WWF ring announcer, of course. Those two guys, were there when wrestling was at its peak in the 80s and the 90s, and all the great stories that they were able to tell in their time with me on the podcast. Some of my proudest moments, certainly collaborating with so many talented content creators like Kurt, of course, with Ditz, Rob from the Bob Culture, Queen of NE, shout out to Queen, Mags, of course, Josh Robinson, Grizz, Foul Original, another John Scott from WrestleLine podcast, Matt Bayliss, of course, and so many other excellent guest hosts, co-hosts that I've had on the podcast. I think I'm up to around 30 guest hosts and contributors that I've had on the podcast, other than myself, of course. Another proud moment was being approached by Turnbuckle TV to partner with them to do interviews, interviewing some of the brightest UK indie wrestling talents on the scene at the moment, like the likes of CJ Carter, Big Effing Joe. That was a really fun interview. And I've got an interview coming up in a couple of weeks with Chantal Jordan. That'll be good fun. And now I'm doing interviews in partnership with Coastal Championship Wrestling in Florida and IWE UK Wrestling in Essex. So really proud to have been approached by these organisations and individuals to partner up with them and to do interviews. So, yeah, I mean, what can I say? Just having a whale of a time, having an absolute blast doing the Wrestling with John's podcast. And we're up to 100 episodes, and hopefully there'll be many more to come. But Kurt, I want to thank you so much for being my guest host, my co-host on this special 100th episode of the Wrestling with John's podcast. Thank you so much, my friend, for helping us out with this episode. And once again, hopefully we'll kind of get you back on the podcast very soon. But before we say goodbye and, say that's the end of this episode, just going to throw out to you to give our listeners any social media plugs, anything you want to kind of plug on the episode. Where can they find you on the internet and on social media, buddy?
So you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Kurt Johansson 93. You can find my podcast at Kurt's Angle, which is going to be coming up a lot more stuff in the future. So yeah, again, Kurt's Angle Pod for that one, and head over to at Ringsiders Pod for myself, Jamie, and Callum. We're going to be doing a lot of good, exciting stuff, a lot of interviews coming up shortly, and yeah, hopefully you'll hear me again soon on Wrestling with Johners.
You definitely will. And I believe you've got a website, is it ringsiders.co.uk, where they can kind of find everything all in one nice, neat, tidy package, ringsiders.co.uk. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We've been having a few issues with one of our hosts recently, which was quite frustrating. So we've been quite relaxed on getting some of the content out there, but that's all sorted now. And yeah, we should be picking up steam again with our articles, and that'll be retrospects where I might be discussing topics or different collaborators and different content creators. And yeah, make sure you check out ringsiders.co.uk.
Cool. And I think, speaking of the next time we're going to have Kurt on, I think we've already got you penciled in to be our guest host or co-host for NXT TakeOver Tampa. So WrestleMania weekend, I think we've got you down to cover the TakeOver show for that weekend. But we're looking forward to having you back on the podcast many times in the future. And likewise, hopefully we can do a lot more collaboration work on Ringsiders or Kurt's Angle somewhere down the line. But thank you again, buddy, for helping us out with this very special 100th episode, and we can't wait to catch up with you again soon. But that is the end of this special episode of Wrestling with Johners. So please keep it tuned to the Wrestling with Johners podcast for all of your weekly NXT, AEW updates, regular WWE and AEW pay-per-view reviews, and so much more, including exclusive interviews like the ones that I mentioned earlier. Tell your friends and tell your family, and don't forget to subscribe to the Wrestling with Johners podcast so you don't miss out on a single episode. Once again, thanks to Kurt for coming on the Wrestling with Johners podcast. Have yourself a great weekend, and we'll catch up with you all again very soon.